The palace burned behind them, and Sergeant Marcus Chen kept his rifle trained on the horizon while Queen Veakor collapsed against the transport's hull. Her violet skin had gone pale, almost translucent, and the ceremonial armor she wore was cracked down the center. Blood, darker than human blood, thick as oil, seeped from a wound beneath her ribs. She pressed one six-fingered hand against it and said nothing. Chen didn't ask if she was hurt. He could see that. He scanned the treeline instead, watching for the glint of enemy optics or the shimmer of cloaked infiltrators. The Kethran rebels had been thorough. They'd hit the palace during the Festival of Ascension, when every noble house gathered under one roof. No guards had survived the initial assault except him, and he'd only lived because he'd been stationed outside, checking perimeter sensors. Behind them, the capital city of Ashfire was a column of black smoke against the twin suns. The queen's entire family was in that smoke. Her consort, her 3 children, her council. Her bloodline, which had ruled the Vareth Empire for 11 generations, had been reduced to one woman bleeding in a stolen transport while a human mercenary decided whether to run or stay. "Why are you still here?" Veakor asked. Her voice was steady despite the wound. That was the thing about the Vareth. They didn't scream. They didn't panic. Even dying, they spoke like they were discussing weather patterns. "Contract's not finished," Chen said. He didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the treeline. "The entity that hired you no longer exists. The treasury is ash. I cannot pay you." "Didn't say anything about pay." "Then you are foolish." "Maybe." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "The rebels will send hunters. They will not stop until I am dead. Every moment you remain, you risk execution. Then, we'd better move." Chen pulled the transport into gear. It was a civilian model, slow and loud, but it had fuel and it ran. He drove them north, away from Ashfire, toward the mountains where the Vareth had built their first cities 3,000 years ago. The roads were empty. Either everyone was hiding or everyone was dead. He suspected both. Veakor sat in the passenger seat, one hand still pressed to her wound. She stared straight ahead, her face unreadable. The Vareth didn't cry. Chen had learned that in his first month on their world. They didn't show grief the way humans did. But he could see it in the way her fingers trembled slightly, in the way her breathing had gone shallow. "What's your plan?" he asked. "There is no plan. There is only distance. That's not a plan. That's a direction. It is sufficient." Chen glanced at her. "You're going to bleed out in about 4 hours if we don't stop that wound. So unless your plan includes dying quietly in this transport, we need to find shelter and medical supplies. I will not endanger you further. Didn't ask your permission." She turned her head then, studying him with those enormous black eyes that reflected light like mirrors. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you remain?" Chen didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road, on the mountains growing larger in the distance. The truth was complicated. He'd been hired as part of a human security contingent, 12 soldiers contracted through a private military company to supplement the Queen's Royal Guard. Standard work, good pay, quiet posting. He'd expected to spend 2 years standing in hallways and watching doors. Then, the rebels had come, and everything had changed in 11 minutes. He'd seen the guards die. He'd heard the screams from inside the palace. He'd made the choice to go in instead of run, and when he'd found the Queen crawling through a service corridor with a plasma burn across her back and her children's blood on her hands, he'd made another choice. "I don't leave people behind," he said finally. "I am not your people. You are now." The transport rattled over a broken section of road. Ahead, Chen spotted a structure, old, pre-Empire construction, built into the mountainside. It looked abandoned. He turned off the main road and drove toward it. "Where are we going?" Vayakor asked. "Somewhere you can stop bleeding. The rebels will track us." "Let them try." He parked the transport inside a collapsed hangar and helped the Queen down. She moved stiffly, each step deliberate. He could see the pain in the way she held herself, though she made no sound. He got her inside the structure, some kind of mining outpost, decades abandoned, and cleared 3 rooms before finding one with intact walls and a door that sealed. "Sit," he said. She sat. Chin pulled his medical kit from his pack and knelt beside her. "I'm going to need to see that wound." "It is not asking." She hesitated, then unfastened the ceremonial armor. Beneath it, her clothing was soaked through with blood. The wound was worse than he thought. A deep puncture, probably from a blade, angled upward beneath her ribs. He could see bone. "This is bad," he said. "I am aware. I'm going to seal it, but you need real medical attention. We need to find a facility. All facilities are compromised. The rebels control the cities. Then we find someone outside the cities. There is no one. The Kefir rebellion has support across the empire. Anyone we approach will report us." Chin pressed a hemostatic pad against the wound and she finally flinched. He worked quickly, sealing what he could, knowing it wouldn't be enough. She needed surgery. She needed blood. She needed things he couldn't provide in an abandoned mining outpost with a field kit. "You should go," Vayakor said quietly. "Leave me here. Return to your people." "Not happening. I am already dead, Sergeant Chin. The Empire is dead. There is nothing left to protect. There's you. I am not didn't ask what you're worth." He finished sealing the wound and sat back. "I made a choice when I went into that palace. I don't unmake choices." She looked at him for a long moment, those mirror-black eyes reflecting his own face back at him. Then she nodded once, a small gesture that somehow carried weight. "Then we survive," she said. "Yeah," Chin said. "We survive." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the smell of smoke from the burning capital. Chin checked his rifle, counted his ammunition, and settled in to wait. The rebels would come. He knew that. But they'd have to come through him first, and he'd been in worse situations. Beside him, Queen Vayakor closed her eyes and breathed slowly, deliberately, conserving her strength. Her hand rested on the hilt of a ceremonial blade she'd carried from the palace, the only weapon she had left. Chin didn't know if she could even use it in her condition, but he respected the gesture. They sat together in silence while the sun set and darkness filled the mountains. The hunters arrived at dawn. Chin saw them before they crested the ridge. For figures moving in tactical formation, their armor configured for mountain terrain. Kethran rebels, professional soldiers, not the mob that had stormed the palace. Someone had sent specialists. He woke the Queen with a hand on her shoulder. She opened her eyes immediately, fully alert despite the wound and the blood loss. "How many?" she asked. "4. Maybe more behind them." She tried to stand and nearly fell. Chin caught her, and, for a moment, they stood close enough that he could see the fine scales along her jawline, the way her pupils contracted in the early light. "I cannot fight," she said. "Didn't ask you to." He helped her to the back of the room, behind a pile of old equipment crates. Not much cover, but enough to keep her out of the initial line of fire. She started to protest, but he was already moving toward the door, his rifle up, his mind calculating angles and timing. The hunters spread out as they approached, too high, too low, textbook formation. Chin waited until they were 30 meters out, then put 2 rounds through the nearest one's helmet. The soldier dropped without a sound. The others scattered, returning fire, and the old mining outpost filled with a sharp crack of plasma rounds hitting stone. Chin moved between positions, never staying in one place, using the architecture the way he'd been trained. The hunters were good. They advanced with discipline, covered each other, used suppressing fire to control his movement. But Chin had fought in worse conditions, against better-equipped opponents, and he understood something they didn't. He had nothing to lose. He dropped the second hunter with a shot through the gap in their armor, where the chest plate met the shoulder guard. The third tried to flank, and Chin caught them with a burst that sent them tumbling down the slope outside. The fourth hunter was smart. They'd pulled back, found cover, and now they were waiting. Chin could feel the patience in their stillness. This one was experienced. Minutes passed. Neither moved. Then Vayakor spoke from behind him, her voice quiet but clear. "The fourth hunter is Rethel. He trained my personal guard. He knows your tactics." "How do you know it's him?" "The way he moves. The patience. It is him." Chen considered this. "Can you talk to him?" "He chose the rebellion. Words will not sway him." "Worth trying." "No, it is not." She paused. "But I will try anyway." She stood, leaning against the crates, and called out in her own language. Chin didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, not pleading, not commanding, just speaking, stating facts, offering perspective. The hunter responded. His voice was rough, angry. "He says I am a tyrant." Vayakor translated. "That my family exploited the Kethran territories for generations. That my children's deaths were justice." Chin said nothing. "He says you are a fool for protecting me. That you will die for nothing." "What did you tell him?" "That he is correct about my family. That we did take from the Kethran. That reform should have come generations ago." She paused. "I told him that my children were 8, 6, and 4 years old, and that justice does not murder children." Silence from outside. Then the hunter moved. Chin saw the shift in shadow and fired, but the hunter was fast, rolling behind new cover. Return fire punched through the doorway, and Chin pulled back. "He's coming in," Chin said. "Yes." "Stay down." The hunter entered fast, exactly as Chin expected, using a flash charge to obscure his approach. Chin had already moved, had already compensated for the angle. He fired 3 times. The hunter fell. Silence returned to the outpost. Chin checked the body. Rethel had been carrying medical supplies. High-grade military field kit, far better than what Chin had. He took it and brought it back to the Queen. "He came prepared to take you alive," Chin said. "Yes. The rebellion wants a trial. They want to justify their violence with ceremony. They're not getting one." He used Rethal's supplies to reseal her wound properly. The new hemostatic foam was military grade, designed for Vareth physiology. Her color improved almost immediately. "Thank you," she said. "Save it. We need to move before more arrive." They left the outpost and traveled deeper into the mountains. Chin drove the transport up old mining roads that hadn't seen traffic in decades. The Queen sat silently beside him, her hand still pressed to her wound despite the improved sealing. "Where are we going?" she asked after hours of silence. "North, beyond the Empire's traditional borders. There is nothing there." "Exactly." She understood. Beyond the Empire's borders lay the fringe territories, lawless, barely habitable, home to outcasts and independent colonies that wanted nothing to do with Vareth politics. If they could reach the fringe, they could disappear. "It will take weeks to reach the border," Vayakor said. "Then we've got work to do." They traveled by night and hid during the day. Chen hunted for supplies, raided abandoned settlements, and taught the queen how to move quietly despite her injury. She learned quickly. The Vareth might not show emotion, but they adapted fast. On the fourth night, she asked him about Earth. "Is it true your people worship nothing?" she asked. They were camped in a cave, a small heatless light between them. "Some of us worship. Some don't. It's complicated. The Vareth believe the universe is ordered, that hierarchy is natural, that some are born to lead and others to follow. And what do you believe?" She was quiet for a long time. "I believe my family would endure, that our legacy was permanent." I was wrong. Legacies don't matter, Chen said. What matters is what you do right now. And what am I doing right now? Surviving. That's enough. She studied him in the dim light. You are strange, Marcus Chen. You fight for someone who cannot reward you. You risk everything for a cause that is already lost. It's not lost if you're still breathing. Why does my breathing matter to you? Chen looked at her, this alien queen who'd lost everything, who sat in a cave with blood still on her ceremonial armor, and spoke about philosophy while assassins hunted her across her own empire. Because someone should care whether you live or die, he said. And right now, I'm the only one available. Something changed in her expression. Not quite a smile. The Vareth didn't really smile, but a softening. An acknowledgement. Then I am fortunate, she said. We'll see. They reached the fringe border 3 weeks later. Chen had expected the Empire to maintain heavy border surveillance, but the checkpoints were abandoned. The rebellion had fractured imperial authority so completely that even the border guards had deserted their posts. They crossed into the fringe without incident. The first colony they found was called Rust Harbor, a mining settlement built into an asteroid cluster, populated by humans, Vareth dissidents, and a dozen other species. Chen parked the transport and helped the queen down. She was stronger now, the wound healing, but still weak. Stay close, he said. They walked through Rust Harbor's market. People stared at them, a human mercenary and a Vareth noble, clearly on the run. But no one stopped them. In the fringe, you didn't ask questions. You didn't get involved. Chen found a medical clinic run by a Talvaran doctor who agreed to properly treat the queen's wound for triple the normal rate. Chen paid with the last of his contracted salary. The doctor worked efficiently, asking no questions, and sent them on their way with antibiotics and instructions. You should not have spent that much, Bayakor said as they left. I'll earn more. How? You are harboring a fugitive. Then I'll figure it out. They found a room in a boarding house at the edge of the colony. 1 room, 2 beds, a shared bathroom down the hall. Chen checked the door locks and window seals before allowing the queen inside. She sat on one of the beds and looked around the tiny space. I was raised in a palace with 300 rooms, she said quietly. And now you're here. Yes. Now I am here. She looked at him. With you. Yeah. Marcus Chen. Yeah. Why are you still here? He'd been waiting for this question since the outpost. He'd known she'd ask it again eventually, when they were somewhere safe enough for honesty. I saw your children, he said. In the palace. I was too late to help them, but I saw them. The oldest one, your daughter, she was trying to protect the younger two. She was 8 years old, and she was standing between them and the rebels with nothing but a ceremonial knife. They, of course, said nothing. Her hand moved to the hilt of her own ceremonial blade. I've done a lot of jobs, Chen continued. Security work, combat deployments, extractions, all of it. And I've seen a lot of people die who didn't deserve it. But those kids... He paused. Someone should have protected them. I couldn't, but I can protect you. So that's what I'm doing. The queen sat very still. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Their names were Kethera, Velen, and Sora. I know. How do you know? I listened. When you were bleeding in the transport, you said their names. You thought you were unconscious, but you kept saying them. She closed her eyes. Her shoulders shook just once. Not crying, the Verith didn't cry, but something close. Chen stood and moved toward the door. I'll be outside if you need anything. Marcus. He stopped. Stay. Please. So he stayed. He sat on the other bed while Queen Veakor, last of her bloodline, finally allowed herself to grieve. She didn't make a sound. She simply sat with her hands folded in her lap, her eyes closed, her body absolutely still. But Chen could see the grief in every line of her posture, in every careful breath. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. Hours passed. Eventually, she opened her eyes. Thank you, she said. For what? For staying. They remained in Rust Harbor for 2 months while the queen healed and Chen worked security jobs for local merchants. The pay was bad, but it was enough. They bought better equipment, false identification, and information about safe routes deeper into the fringe. The queen changed during those months. She stopped wearing the ceremonial armor and dressed like a common traveler. She learned to cook human food because the local markets didn't stock Vera supplies. She practiced with weapons because Chen insisted she know how to defend herself. She also smiled. It was small, barely noticeable, but Chen caught it sometimes when they shared meals or when she successfully completed a drill he taught her. The Verith didn't smile often, but when they did, it meant something. I have been thinking, she said one evening. They were eating in their room, a simple meal of protein bars and reconstituted vegetables. About purpose. What comes next? Survival comes next. Survival is not purpose. It is merely continuation. Chen considered this. What do you want? I want to rebuild. Not the empire, that is gone. But something. A community. A place where those who lost everything in the rebellion can start again. That's a big goal. Yes. You'd need resources. People. Land. I know. And you'd be a target. The rebels won't stop hunting you. I know that too. She looked at him. But I cannot simply hide forever. My children died for nothing. Their death should mean something. Chun understood. He'd met soldiers who needed purpose after trauma, who couldn't just exist without a mission. The queen was no different. Okay, he said. Okay. If you're doing this, I'm helping. Marcus, you have already given too much. Didn't ask your permission. He smiled slightly. Besides, someone needs to keep you from getting killed. She studied him for a long moment, those mirror-black eyes reflecting his face. Then she reached across the small table and placed her 6-fingered hand over his. Thank you, she said, for everything. They left Rust Harbor and traveled deeper into the fringe, searching for a place to build what the queen envisioned. They found it on a small moon orbiting a gas giant, abandoned terraforming equipment, breathable atmosphere, arable land. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Word spread slowly. Refugees began arriving, Verith who'd fled the rebellion, humans who'd lost work when the empire collapsed, other species displaced by the chaos. They came because someone offered hope instead of violence. They stayed because the queen, despite having lost everything, still believed in building something better. Chen became her security chief, her advisor, her friend. He trained defenders, established protocols, negotiated with traders. He stood beside her when she addressed the growing community, and he stood guard when she slept. Years passed. The settlement grew into a town, the town into a small city. The rebellion and the empire collapsed into civil war. The Vera throne remained empty. But on a small moon in the fringe, refugees built homes and farms and workshops. They built schools. They built futures. And, through it all, Sergeant Marcus Chen stood beside Queen Veakor, the soldier who'd refused to leave, the human who'd chosen loyalty over logic. One evening, they stood together on a platform overlooking the city. The gas giant filled half the sky, its storms painting the horizon in shades of orange and red. "I never thanked you properly," Veakor said. "You've thanked me 100 times. Not for staying. For believing this was possible when I could not." Chen looked at the city, the lights, the people, the life they'd built from nothing. "You did the hard part. I just kept you alive long enough to see it." "No. You gave me a reason to stay alive." She turned to him. "You gave me purpose when I had none. You would have found it eventually. Perhaps. But I would not have survived long enough to find it without you." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city. Somewhere below, children played in streets that hadn't existed 5 years ago. Families ate dinners in homes they'd built themselves. People lived without fear, without tyranny, without the weight of empire. "Do you regret it?" Veakor asked. "Staying?" Chen thought about the palace burning, the choice he'd made, everything that had followed. He thought about contracts and payment and all the logical reasons he should have walked away. "No," he said. "Not for a second." She smiled then, that rare Verith smile that meant everything. "Good," she said. "Because I would be lost without you, Marcus Chen." "Yeah," he said. "I know." They stood together as the sun set, a queen and her guard, 2 survivors who'd built something impossible from the ashes of everything they'd lost. Below them, their city lived and breathed and grew, proof that loyalty meant something, that choice mattered, that one person refusing to abandon another could change everything. And, in the morning, they would begin again.